Hello everyone, welcome to this How To webinar. My name is Donna Stevenson and I'm part of the NeuroBox family, and it's great to have your company for what is going to be another really informative session with some great guests. So this session is all about how to empower those with dynamic disabilities in the workplace. So just a bit of a kind of heads up about how we work for these how-to webinars. These are our deeper dives with the experts around a topic. And as I say, we're going to have a look at empowerment around dynamic disabilities today, all about the workplace, because of course that is our passion here at NeuroBox. And we can think of no better guests than to join us as we explore these really important issues than some of the team from FEND Foundations Dimensions. I do apologise. They are going to share some slides, and then we're going to have a Q&A as well. So who have we got as part of the FND family? We have got Dr. Stephanie Roxanne Bianca. She is the senior lecturer in neuropsychology at Lincoln Bishop University, and she's also the vice chair and lead medical advisory board as part of FND Dimensions. So Dr. Stephanie, it's great to have your company. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
We are also joined by the chair of FND Dimensions. It's Jane Breton. She is also a change and leadership consultant. Jane, again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
You're welcome. It's really great to be back. So thanks for having us.
It's always lovely to talk to you guys. Now, sadly, everyone, we were going to be joined by wonderful Helen Crossley, who's the CEO of FND Dimensions, but she can't make it today. But this has been a real team effort. So we know that we're going to share FND's contact details afterwards, and the whole team will be on the other end of those emails and so on. Okay, so some housekeeping about how we share thoughts. For those of you who are with us live and are familiar with Zoom, you may see that we have a Q&A section. That's the place that we suggest that you put your questions, which we'll have a look at after our session with the guys from FND. And then anything you want to share throughout, please use the chat, because I'd love to hear from you. I know in the session that the guys want to kind of ask a question as well, so we'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat box. And say hi to everyone. Where are you joining us from today? It's always lovely to hear about where you're coming from as part of the conversations as well. So I think that pretty much covers it. So what we'll do then is I'll hand over to Jane, because she's going to be in charge of the slides. Jane, if you want to start sharing, once we know that we're happy, we will hand over to you.
Okay.
This is always the bit where we get a bit nervous when we're sharing the tech.
Brilliant. Can you see a slide?
Brilliant. It's worked. Isn't it great when it works?
It's lovely,
right.
isn't it? Okay.
Experts, over to you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the warm introduction, Donna. It was beautiful. And thank you again to NeuroBox for hosting us. This is Invisible Disabilities Week as well. So what better week to have this talk around empowering those with dynamic disabilities in the workplace. Can I have the next slide, please, Jane? I'm not trusted with the slide buttons, with good reason. So the whole purpose of today's session is to talk about, and not just talk about, but give some practical guidance and advice on how we can all improve the workplace for those living with dynamic disabilities. Just before we go into the content today, my name is Dr. Steph Blanco. As Donna has wonderfully said in her introduction, I'm a neuropsychologist, I'm an academic and researcher based at Lincoln Bishop University. All of my research is around dynamic disabilities, hidden disabilities, and conditions that just don't get a lot of attention. I work in systems and environments that help to shape those conversations. So that might be, for example, working with the NHS on healthcare pathways for particular disabilities, or working with universities or other workplace environments to change the environment for those with dynamic disabilities. I'm also proudly the Vice Chair at FND Dimensions, where we provide support, we provide knowledge and awareness for those with functional neurological disorder. And I will let Jane introduce herself. We work together on many, many avenues.
Hi, Steph. Thank you. Yeah, so very briefly, Steph and I do work together. We now have our consultancy together as well. So Steph does a lot around the medical side of it. I tend to take the leadership and change aspects. And I'm also run our own City and Guild Centre, for example. The thing that I care most about me is I'm not a typical, and I always like to say I'm not a typical anything. However, I am very proud to be the chair of FND Dimensions and also to be here today with Steph and at Neurobox. So thank you.
Jane, I think the important thing to recognise as well, both me and Jane come from different professional backgrounds, yet we also inform our practice through our own lived experience and that of the work that we do in the third sector, particularly at FND Dimensions. So our little plan for today, we're going to talk about dynamic disability and what that means, why we're using that term in particular. And then we'll go through dynamic disability and inclusion through a wider EDI lens and start to look at how we can lead the change. Towards the end, we'll do a bit of a summary of our key points and some key take-home messages for you guys to be able to take away and actually act upon now. And we'll make sure that there's plenty of time for questions and answers if people have them. Please do use the functions that Donna's spoken about at the beginning of this session. Okay, so dynamic disabilities. Obviously, I've sort of highlighted this is Invisible Disabilities Week and what a good time to have this webinar. And then I've proceeded to use this other term, dynamic disabilities, instead. And I think it's important right at the start to make the distinction about why we use that term in particular. Dynamic disabilities are conditions that fluctuate. And these could be conditions that fluctuate in intensity, in visibility, and in impact. We tend to use the term dynamic disabilities instead of invisible disabilities for a wide variety of reasons. One of them is that invisible simply focuses on how a disability appears to others, whereas dynamic is more about how it behaves itself, how it can change over time in intensity or presentation, for example. And many people's conditions are sometimes visible. Things like mobility aids, fatigue, pain can have really visible signs, and sometimes not. And invisible can kind of erase that nuance a little bit. It also recognises that unpredictability and adaptability of systems and conditions, and it emphasises that there may be periods of fluctuation, remission, relapse, and that's really key when we're talking about how to empower people in a workplace setting, because it helps employers to understand that actually support needs may shift over time or on given days, and they might not stay as fixed as people assume that they would. Also, to call something invisible sometimes unintentionally suggests that someone is hiding it, whereas the term dynamic actually helps us to reframe this as just a natural part of health and health variability rather than some kind of concealment. We don't want invisible disabilities or dynamic disabilities in any way to be seen as this, hidden dirty secret that we must keep to ourselves. And it's part of that empowering language and changing the conversation about what it means to have inclusive language in our workplaces. It validates lived experience without centering it on this idea of a deficit, and sits comfortably alongside other terms that we've seen change as well. So things like neurodivergent, chronic illness, etc. So here, what we're trying to do is invite a system that's more flexible, that is more responsive, and that has continuous and empowering dialogue instead. Next slide, please. Why this also matters. So the stats around invisible disabilities are quite vague. What we do know is 1 in 4 working age people in the UK report some kind of disability. However, about 80% of all disabilities are actually invisible. And that means that we don't have the exact stats on invisible disabilities in the workplace. This is pretty much an estimate. One of the reasons for that is when someone is employed by an organisation, often there is a box where people can announce disabilities and report disabilities very early on in their employment journey. However, those boxes are a little bit fixed and a little bit static. Very often they're based on symptom clusters, or there might be a box for long term or other, and it doesn't really capture the whole range of invisible disabilities and dynamic conditions. So dynamic conditions could include things like chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, functional neurological disorder, but it could also include elements of or conditions related to women's health. It could also include things like neurodivergence, so ASD, ADHD, and long COVID and these kind of things. What we do know is that employment rates for disabled people are very low compared to non-disabled peers. And there are clearly barriers here in accessing workplace in the first place. Then the barriers kind of increase for those with disabilities within the workplace as well. There's also elements of intersectionality here as well, which we will cover later on in this presentation around ideas of gender, age, race, class, etc. It's really important to notice that very early on. Next slide, please. There are other things that we need to consider as well, particularly in terms of invisible disabilities. There was a HR review in 2024 that stated that 58% of those with invisible disabilities in their workplaces did not feel prioritised. And actually, a people management report in 2024 also said that people rated getting support as one of the most difficult things. And actually, it was so difficult that sometimes it wasn't worth the hassle of going through it in the first place. Disabled employees still earn less than non-disabled counterparts, and there are elements of bullying reported throughout major systems and major workplaces. For example, NHS report from NHS England in 2024 reported extremely high rates of bullying of disabled staff. It's quite shocking that we're talking about this in this day and age still, but it's very important to highlight that there are cultures that underpin this kind of treatment of those with disabilities, and particularly dynamic disabilities. Next slide, please. When we're talking about disability inclusion, we're not talking about any particular special treatment. We're talking about flexible approaches that actually support a wide range of people. These are some of the quotes that me and Jane have heard, whether that's through our peer support work, through our third sector work, or through our consultancy. So things like, I never know how I feel when I wake up. Some days I'm fine, others I can't focus. And sometimes employers expect people to know what their needs are going to be every single day and have the same needs and the same access requirements. That's simply not the case for many. It's about enabling flexibility and enabling a conversation where someone can voice and express needs that they are aware of, that they have, that can actually make them more effective and productive in the workplace. We also hear of comments from people who are aware of their needs and aware of the things that they need to do to manage their condition and in order for them to be more productive. So comments like a quiet camera on Teams doesn't mean disinterest, it's me managing my fatigue. Is a prime example. Sometimes in workplaces, people assume that if someone's got their camera off, they're not paying attention, they're not included in the conversation, they're perhaps not listening, and they're off doing their washing or something else instead. But actually, for some people, it may be their way of managing, things like Zoom fatigue or taking a moment to have a break from the screen because they know that they need to do that in order to power through the rest of their day. It doesn't always mean disinterest. It's normally someone managing their symptoms so that they don't reach a crisis point where actually it's going to take them even more to recover from, or it's going to have much more of an impact on their work throughout the rest of the day or the week even. We hear this about other things that someone might put in place to support them. So whether that is, using headsets to block out some additional sensory noises that may have an impact on symptoms, or sunglasses to block out maybe particular lighting or flickers in lighting, as another example. And again, it's about recognizing that those who live with dynamic conditions are the ones with the greatest understanding of what can support them. is also to not assume that everyone with one condition is going to have the same needs. So if you take the example of ASD, autism spectrum disorder, as an example, we know that not everyone with ASD has the same set of symptoms, and actually sometimes it can be very context dependent, right? Certain environments or certain days, or perhaps something has happened, whether that's biologically or socially, that has just left their symptoms a little bit more difficult to manage than usual. And on those days, they may need to put into place extra adjustments that perhaps they don't need on other days. The same rule applies across conditions. We all have individual variation in how our symptoms present and how they may fluctuate and change on a given day. And it's about recognizing that this isn't special treatment. This is someone managing their symptoms. It's not something to be pointed out or highlighted as being rude or unprofessional. It's not about special treatment in any way, shape, or form. It's about enabling people to feel comfortable to express their needs and comfortable to enact on those needs, and also making an allowance to enable them to fully contribute and not lose masses of skills from our workplaces. Next slide, please. This leads me on to the disclosure dilemma. So many employees do hesitate to disclose disabilities, and even more hesitate to disclose dynamic disabilities. Sometimes this is a difficulty in articulating needs. It might be fears around stigma or fears around being judged as unreliable, potentially career damaging as well. We've certainly heard people report that to us, that they feel that they can't tell their place of employment because they're worried about the implications of informing them. They're worried that it means that they're not going to be seen as the most productive or efficient person to go for that next career jump. Perhaps if the organisation feels a little bit unstable at the present time and there's maybe a worry about job security, they're definitely not going to want to share that they need additional needs because they're worried that the workplace is simply going to assume this is going to cost us some money. The other difficulty is that the whole process of getting these access needs in the first place is actually rather difficult. A lot of employers still insist on having medical proof and having some kind of proof that this is what the person needs. The thing that they're saying they need is the thing that they actually need from a medical perspective. That can take a lot of time to get that evidence. Some people are still living without a diagnosis because a lot of dynamic disabilities are a little bit confusing, or there might be long wait lists to actually get the diagnosis. And sometimes, as I've said before, the person is the expert in understanding what they need. Not everyone with the same condition is going to have the same needs. So a medical expert's opinion isn't always the most valid thing. I always say that it takes a great deal of time and admin to be ill, and we have to consider how much time it takes to get these things and the cost involved. Medical letters, doctor's appointments, form filling are all additional things that someone with a dynamic disability has to do that someone that is an equal counterpart that doesn't have a disability doesn't need to do. And actually there's this issue of, again, the flexibility in those needs, that they're not going to have the same needs every day. So this shouldn't be seen as a tick box exercise. This should be seen as a conversation where the person in front of you is that's telling you about their needs is the expert in the room and can articulate those perhaps a little bit more clearly than a doctor's letter could. Disclosure should feel safe. And that's one of the key take homes we want to give you from today. As an example, the pandemic, for all of its many, many problems, did show us what's actually possible in terms of some elements of flexibility. And this is just one example. We've got many more. Remote work, for example, had benefits for a wide range of people, not just those with dynamic disabilities. It also had benefits for parents. If there are parents in the room, you will remember, I'm sure, the joys of trying to manage Zoom calls with children racing around in the background behind you. But it certainly enabled more people to enter the workplace. There was a review from Scope in 2022 that said that people found that flexibility actually improved performance. And we saw this through our third sector work as well at FND Dimensions, that more people were able to access employment than ever before and actually have greater access to employment opportunities that they didn't have previously. More people were entering the workplace, there was a greater diversity of skills, and actually people found that they were more productive in being able to work more flexibly and having that ability to have elements of their day that weren't as fixed. a lot of reports still say that disabled workers in particular want to keep home working and hybrid working moving into the future. And actually, they felt like they were on a more equal playing field. There's no tax from the travel and the commute into the office, which often exhausts people before they've even made it into work. They could show up and work in a way that was comfortable for them, without those additional demands of being in the office. Also meant they could structure their time a little bit more in terms of, as an example, if they were having an increase in symptoms, being able to stop, go rest, take a pause from the screen and come back to it, which is maybe something they can't do in a workplace environment. So one thing is to introduce flexibility like this where possible in a workplace, to enable that more equal playing field amongst people. So that is kind of a broad introduction into dynamic disabilities and some of the things that we're talking about today. And I'm going to let Jane now go through disability inclusion from a wider EDI lens, leading into those elements of how we can actually enact change.
Thanks ever so much, Steph. And as always, I've just find what you know and how you explain it absolutely brilliant. So thank you for that. So we're going to do something a bit different now. We're going to do a short practical. So if you can grab a pen and paper, if that's something that you can do, or just find a way to record your thoughts. Okay. So this word, take a moment and look at this word, disability. Note down your thoughts about this word. And if you can, add them to the chat function. Think about how the word sounds. Think about your thoughts and think about how your body reacted when you saw that. I'm just going to give you 15 seconds to just have that instant write down. Not too much detail, just how you instantly reacted.
Jane, I've got my eye on the chat box.
Thank you.
And we've started to get some comments through, so thank you everyone.
Brilliant.
Let me have a look at this. Thank you guys for sharing thoughts. So we've got here negativity, stigma, unfairness, challenges. We've got another attendee, the word negative. Another voice coming through, discrimination. Let me see what else as I scroll through. Thank you everyone for sharing these.
It's really nice to have such interaction.
Yeah, we've got the word dis hyphen. It means not as good as, overly negative, only one way of being able. So that's really insightful. Thank you for that. Another thought, not at all able. Another thought, less than. Got more coming through. I tolerate it rather than like it. Doesn't resonate. Feels like a deficit. Somebody else has shared not able.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I think that's it, Jane.
Thank you. And this is one of the things I wanted to, I didn't know what words you would come up with, but this is one of the things I think is the problem with a disability generally, is the word disability has got these innate reactions to it. The word itself, when someone says they have a disability, this is what most people that I have come across, that if they're honest with themselves, is what they think and what they feel about that word. So when someone says they're disabled, as managers within an organization, that tends to be our gut reaction to that word. So let's have a different think about this now. So think about an efficient member of your team, good quality member of your team, and think about how much better your life is because they are good at what they do. Then imagine their world changes. Same again. What happens to your body when you see these words about this efficient member of your team? Their world has just changed. What do you think when you see these words? Note down your thoughts, and if you can, just add them into the chat. This efficient member of your team, and their world has just changed.
Just got my eye on the chat again, Jane.
Thank you.
So we're just waiting for wonderful attendees to share. Very powerful, actually. these questions. Okay, so we've got our first thoughts coming through. Thank you so much. We've got need support, grief, difficulties, upside down. Another thought coming through, concern for them, I guess, and me if I'm honest. Interesting. Let's see if there's anything else coming through.
I'm really grateful for the honesty from the people that are with us today.
Yeah.
It's really powerful.
Yeah. I think as well, from my side, Jane, while we wait for more, is fear.
Yep.
Fear for the person, but also fear for me as a manager, a colleague, thinking, I guess quite selfishly in some ways, what are we going to try and do about this? So we've got some more thoughts in the chat. Could be either positive or negative changes to them, or the other way around. So thank you for that. We've got as well, initially I thought of a negative change, but could be a good change. So we've got people challenging their own kind of reactions. Another comment, all aspects of their life, everything up in the air, no certainty.
Okay, so currently we've got disability, which has a negative connotation from the feedback we've been given. There will changes, which is a very unsettling type of feelings that are coming through. Okay, so thinking about them again, one day they're performing as well as normal. They're absolutely nailing it. Then imagine one day they come to you and go, I'm absolutely exhausted. Can I go home early, please? What's happened to your body when you saw these words? They're disabled, their world has changed, and now they want to go home early. Are you happy, you sad, frustrated? What are your words? Again, write down your thoughts, and if you can, add some into the chat.
We've got the word compassion has come through.
Okay.
Jane, just a lovely word. Let's just see if we've
I
got
love
any
that
other
word.
thoughts coming through. Okay, we've got an attendee kind of saying what's happened to change, and that they be concerned. So kind of questioning maybe with them, what is the change? Just seeing if there's anything else coming through. Concern, so this is what another individual shares, that they may require additional support, ask if they wish to have adjustments. Another
Oh, I'd
attendee
like that
says,
person to be my manager.
yeah, negotiating, working with them to find solutions. So this type of a dialogue.
Okay, so while we wait
yeah.
some more words to come.
Oh, we've got another one. Worried about them, but also about productivity.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to have a quick reflect on this now, and I mean really quick, just about how you're feeling now that I've asked you those difficult questions, because we get trained, there are laws, there are cultures that we're involved in at work that say to us we must make reasonable adjustments for people who are disabled. But actually, is that how you really feel? One of the things we hear quite a lot in the consultancy is around somebody who's disabled. It can feel unsettling. It can feel work that a manager's not got time to do to be able to make those adjustments for that person. It's hassle they don't need, is what I got told once. So just check in with yourself, because if someone uses the word disabled, if inside you, those feelings you've written down is how you really feel, then I find that if I know how I'm really feeling about something, then I can watch my behaviour and my wording around that. So just reflect on those words, not so much now because I'm about to continue, but in the future when someone says to you. Because people with a dynamic disability, you're going to get to hear is they are disabled, typically, and one day they will be fine, and then the next day they won't be. So, another question that's changed things a little bit. Have a look at this apple. What's the first thing you see with this apple? What's the first thing that you feel? And wherever it is you're noting down your thoughts, just note down 2 or 3 things about this apple. And what was the first thing that you saw in this apple?
Jane, we've had a comment in the chat just about what you were sharing before this slide. And this person's been very honest to say, I feel very conflicted. I'm a disabled neurodivergent person, but I'm also a service manager who is held accountable for my team's performance. So thank you for your
That is a really
honesty.
good question, actually. It'd be really good to pick that up in the Q&A, because I've got some slides in a bit that hopefully will help with that.
Thank you to that person for being
it's good.
Yeah.
I'm loving the honesty.
Yeah.
Okay, so with this apple, most people say they see the bite mark, okay? And so my question to you then is, if you saw this image instead, which is the full apple, then think about those words about what it was that you wrote down that you saw. Had you considered what else is going on around this image, around this apple? Had you considered how can you see the rest of the apple? How can you see about the rest of what's going on for this apple? Is it going up or is it going down? And how can you lessen the bite size? Okay, because very often when somebody is disabled, in our experience, people tend to focus on the disability and not focus on the rest of the talents and skills and attributes of that person. So they will focus on the bite mark, not on the rest of the green area. Okay, they won't look at how they can support that person to be the very best that they can be. So moving on then, Steph talked about intersectionality very briefly earlier, and intersectionality was or is a framework which was originally the concept of a Kimberly Crenshaw, Kimberly Crenshaw was an American civil rights activist and a scholar of critical race. But what she said is that race, class, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, nationality, ability, and age don't exist separately. They shape and influence each other. So think about this for the minute. Think about identity as overlapping circles, not separate boxes. A person is more than just their gender or their race or their disability. And these parts of who we are interact and shape how we experience the workplace. So think about a monolith. Okay, I will explain why a monolith. You could have two monoliths that look identical. They each have a brick of ethnicity, religion, sexuality, gender, identity, all of those. They all make who we are. But monoliths are not actually the same because we have a unique blend of many characteristics and influences that have been in our lives that help us to move and evolve, okay? So, for example, I'm female, I'm mid-50s, I'm heterosexual, and I'm disabled. And I'm forever changing. And I experience new situations and I'm learning new knowledge and life around me influences. So have a think about people around you. Have you seen them change and evolve as life happens and they have different experiences? And even people's reaction to this image will be different. Why on earth am I saying this? It's because you're not a monolith. No one's a monolith. We are all different. We are not identical. We move and we grow and we change. So to think about somebody being disabled, that is only one of their bricks. And that brick will be different for each person. And we are not just that brick of disability. And that every single brick within us will change and we will move and grow. Being disabled in 2025 doesn't seem to have moved an awful lot over the years. We still have a lot of barriers about being able to get accessible to work, as Steph talked about. There's also barriers to social inclusion. For example, I was invited to a work reunion. It was in London, and it was in a place that I can't easily get to. So me and somebody else who's also wheelchair bound weren't able to go. Public transport can be exhausting, as Steph said. Getting access to buildings, we've got an example later. There's so many issues with people being able to access work. And it's not me saying this. There was a government report back in 2025 that actually showed all of this. So there's a lot of barriers to disabled people getting into work. However, we also know that businesses worry about, but what about the cost of employing disabled people? Well, in 2024, the Business Disability Forum did a report, and part of that report was some evidence done by the McKinsey group in 2015. And what they found is that organisations that rank most highly in terms of diversity, and I know diversity isn't just disability, but most highly in terms of diversity, had financial returns that were on average 35% above the mean for their industry. Obviously, if you're an inclusive employer, it can improve your brand. Disabled employees bring unique experiences and skills that are hugely valuable for innovation. Many disabled peoples have developed ways of living with their disability that make them even more innovative thinkers. And this is the report that says this. It's not just me. Teams with more disabled people were proportionally more productive. And navigating uninclusive workplaces and social barriers can hone skills such as agile thinking, diligence, ability to plan, and willingness to experiment with new approaches. And what they found is that 75% of people versus 66% of people without a disability, so 75% of people with a disability have value-driving ideas. And frustratingly, a fifth of the population, roughly, who are not being tapped into because of disability. So we're missing out on talents. It's untapped talent. So when people think about we want to make change, but the cost, I suggest we actually look at the evidence. Perception is one thing, reality is something else. All the evidence is showing that having disabled people within your team actually improves the performance of your company. So what can you do about it? And why should you bother? You know, why make the effort to make change? Well, the first thing, there's a law. The Equality Act in 2010 covered discrimination generally, and it included the Disability Discrimination Act of 1995. And with the audience that's here today, I'm not going to go into that, but there is law actually backing up why you need to support people with dynamic disability. But also society is changing. Steph and I were talking about back to 1993 and how things were in 1993 and how some things have changed and some things haven't. But society is changing. We are becoming much more inclusive as a society. Yes, we have a way to go. But if you don't keep up, society will overtake you. Also, your personal brand. If you are excluding people who are disabled, is that the brand that you want to present? And that is a choice for you, of course. There's ethics. There's also respect for others. And there's also about making a difference. I think back to the changes I've managed to make in places that I've been to and companies that I've been involved in around my disability. And I can feel very proud of the fact that I've made a difference, that my life on this planet has made a difference to other people. And is that something you want for you? So thinking now about people who have a dynamic disability at work, Steph's covered some of this already. When you've got a dynamic disability, it's very difficult to plan, whether it be for today or the future. Planning is very difficult, mainly because we've got no health pattern. I don't know in the morning whether I'm going to wake up globally paralysed or I'm going to wake up, jump out of bed and be full of energy. I just don't know. So I have to be very careful how I plan my time. Also, we begin to lose trust in our own bodies. So going to work, if we're not feeling very well, we don't necessarily know what we're going to feel like by the end of the day. Working hours can be really tricky because I know there's more flexibility now than there has been for a very long time, like probably ever, but there's still a long way to go. If I wanted to work into the evening instead of in the morning, that can be tricky for some employers. There's a lot of focus at the moment on trying to encourage managers to focus on output not on the actual working hours themselves. Another challenge is most people with a disability, not all, but most, seem to have very low self-esteem or low self-worth, sense of self-worth. And that can actually cause issues with things like asking for accessibility arrangements and asking for support. Because as Steph said, the challenges of actually getting a job anyway is quite tricky. So what we find is people who've actually in work are so grateful that they've got the job. First of all, they're an extremely dedicated employee, but secondly, they don't want to cause a problem. Another problem people have with dynamic disabilities at work is social commitments, and social life at work is actually really important. So just going for lunch, or as I said earlier, about going out for a celebration in London was something I actually couldn't do. They're also worried because very often people with a dynamic disability, because one day they're okay and then they're not. There's a lot of accusations about faking it, and that can happen in the workplace as well. And masking all of this so that they don't feel a burden to people is absolutely exhausting. And what we say within Dimensions with the board that Steph and I chair is be yourself, bring yourself to us. In the board meetings, people are literally the way that they are. We have a culture of no masks. So how can you make a difference? And what are these images all about on the left? So just having somebody with a dynamic disability, one day, they're absolutely fine. They can stand up and they can stick post-it notes on a planning board. The next day, they might not be able to walk very well, or they might not be able to cognitively think or speak in the way that you would expect them to. So what can you do? First of all, believe them. When someone's got a dynamic disability, the amount of times that we hear, nobody believes me, they think I'm faking it. And I'm not going to go into the abuse that we get from people, but it happens. So let them know that you believe them. Steph talked about how difficult medical proof can be in terms of getting access to it. Do believe them. You've recruited these people because of the fact you see so many good qualities in them. So unless you've got reason not to trust them, real factual reason, my guidance is trust what they are saying. People, in my experience, I've never come across anybody who has made up that they've got a dynamic disability, because they just don't. Be very patient and reassuring them. So things like, it's really great that you've come to work today. It's okay that you feel a bit tired. Don't worry about it. Of course, we believe you. You're a great member of the team, as you would for any member of the team, specifically for people while they're building up their confidence. With timescales, one of the things that I find a challenge is when people give me very, very tight timescales when I don't know how I'm going to feel the next day. So yes, I do understand after 30 years of working in corporate and running my own company that we have to deliver to timescales. I'm not saying that. Just be realistic with what they are. And if your timescale is actually, I need it for next Friday, don't give them a hard date of next Wednesday. Tell them, aim for next Wednesday. The deadline really is next Friday, but let's have a conversation about it on Wednesday. Be very clear to them about what their priorities are. Then I do this in my own company. Steph and I do it within our consultancy, and we do it within Dimensions. We're very busy in all of our areas, but we know what our top priorities are. We know that if we're not feeling very well, that is the thing we need to focus on. Things like location, be really flexible on where they can work, different types of meeting systems, and try and introduce as many adaptive technologies as you can to make it easy for them. And schemes like Access to Work should be able to help you with that. Steph talked about having a conversation. The expert in their disability is the person with that disability. So consider asking questions like Steph and I ask, which is, are there ways we can help stretch your day or tasks to help you manage your energy and your focus? Somebody with ADHD, for example, I've got ADHD, and if I'm in a very noisy environment, I can get completely distracted. So something that I used to do when I was in corporate was just take myself off to a meeting room and just sit quietly in a meeting room. I want to make your life at work as easy as I can. What might help you thrive? I believe you. Here are some examples of what has worked for others. Do any of them resonate for you? And again, Steph and I do this when we work with corporates. We give a list of examples, and I do it quite a lot with universities, and obviously Steph works in the university as well. And the question that's one of my favourites is, if you were in charge of making this company a brilliant place for people with FND, CFS, ADHD, what would you do? Also, lead by example. Remove all the barriers for them to be able to thrive. Understand what their barriers are and remove them. Openly show that you accept that they have a disability. So little things like, if they're in a wheelchair, make sure their desk, it can be accessed by a wheelchair. Make sure if they're in a meeting, make sure there's space for their wheelchair. Model openness, treat them with respect and open about, to the extent of their boundaries, their permitted boundaries. But if you've got a disability and you feel comfortable, share it if you can. I do about mine, and it seems to help other people open about their challenges. Champion positive change. Now, what this means is if you're in a meeting, make sure you think about people who've got a disability and dynamic disability. And if somebody speaks something negative, be aware to stop that negative gossip or that stigma or that terminology. Organise some awareness training. Something that is becoming quite common now is peer groups. So people that have got disabilities, that's been done at universities for a long time. And these peer groups are now starting in workplaces as well. Ensure that you use inclusive language. And as I said earlier, challenge stigma and gossip. If someone says something negative, stop it before it's allowed to get started. So, yeah. Meetings. Just a couple of points on meetings. A couple of questions are there certain types of meetings or interactions that are more difficult for you? And are there activities, meetings, or processes that make work unnecessarily stressful? So a couple of things that might help are discuss the key points that you need to get across in the agenda first. Something we do a lot in Dimensions is we put the key things that people need to know about, talk about, we need their opinion on at the start of the agenda. And we do that because then if somebody is starting to feel very tired, or they need to leave the meeting, or they're just really struggling to concentrate, we know we've got the key things out first. Issue the agenda early so that they can have time to think about what they want to say. Steph and I always do check in about energy levels so that you know that if somebody's struggling, you can then support them a little bit during the meeting. And that's not just for people who are disabled, actually, that's for everybody. Encourage everybody to speak. If you remember about confidence with people with a disability, they sometimes struggle to have the confidence to say anything. And also somebody with a dynamic disability, quite a lot of us struggle with speech sometimes. So to give them patience to speak. So in the board, we had a board meeting on Monday night and we had a lot of people ticking, a lot of people with speech issues. And we know whether people want to just be given the grace of space to be able to say their own words, or if they're really struggling, they want us to help with their speech. So just be aware of that. Use captions in meetings. I find this really useful, that I can actually read the words as people just saying them. Record meetings where possible. And as we've talked about a lot, about location flexibility. So Steph, I know we've got loads of examples. Can you just summarize what this light bulbs and sunglasses means?
Yeah, so we know that we're giving you lots of tips to go away with today, but some very simple things. I alluded to one at the start, which was sunglasses. Some people simply cannot tolerate certain lighting conditions. I find, for example, in autumn months in particular, the sun is slightly lower in the sky, and wearing a pair of sunglasses just helps to prevent things like a migraine or too much sensory information, which could prevent some adverse effects for me, like seizures, for example. And that is a very simple thing to employ, but it can sometimes be associated with a bit of stigma in a workplace setting. I have had comments in the past that I have heard to me directly or to others that we've, suggested this as a possible flexibility for them, is like, oh, are you drunk? Is a prime example. You look a bit rough today and you're wearing sunglasses. Maybe you had too many things to drink last night. And it's obviously a really negative thing to point out about someone. If someone is wearing a pair of sunglasses, maybe assume that they're wearing it for a reason. And light bulbs, some consultancy projects that me and Jane have worked on, particularly in university settings or in healthcare settings, there is a tendency to have quite white clinical spaces on a very modernized approach with those nice bright fluorescent lights. But actually, for a wide range of people with dynamic disabilities, lighting can be a huge problem. And some of our big consultancy jobs, actually, a very simple recommendation that has saved the company time, money, and increased productivity and everything else is just to change the color of the light bulbs to a warmer light that is softer, less sensory overpowering, and enables people not to have adverse symptoms.
Thanks ever so much, Steph. And it is really the simple changes, isn't it? And leading on to that, we were in a situation recently where somebody was really excited that they had disabled lifts, disabled toilets, which was absolutely brilliant. This was the lift. This is me on my little mobility scooter here. And this is the button. Perfect height. Everything's great. But to get to the disabled toilet and the disabled lift, you have to go through this door, which has no automatic button. Trying to open this on a disability scooter is very difficult. It's in through here that you actually get to the lift and to the toilet. So they're inaccessible because of this door. So it's things like that that Steph and I actually spot quite a lot. So one of the things you might be able to ask is, how can we improve your workspace or work environment? And as Steph's talked about lighting, noise, temperature, or even doors. So starting to bring this to a close, thinking about your policies and your strategies. Think about this picture of these people. Which one of these people in this group has a dynamic disability? Who do you think it is? And what do you think might help them? Well, for me, I've got absolutely no idea. I don't know which one of them's got a dynamic disability, and I don't know what would help them because I haven't asked them. And in the projects that I've managed, and I've managed some very, very large change projects, people often ask why my projects are so successful. And the answer is, I involve the people who are being impacted. I ask the questions. So when you do policies and you do strategies about anything in your business, and I mean anything, involve people from all different characteristics. And in this particular case, include people who've got dynamic disabilities because their needs will be different. And then also, how are you going to prove that you are making these changes and that things are working? So here's some examples. Your key performance indicators. If you have some key performance indicators related to dynamic disabilities, that'd be great. And as Steph said, make sure you put some tracking in for people who've got dynamic disabilities specifically. Note it in your performance appraisals. Make sure you put them in your strategy and your goals and track that you're actually doing it. A lot of people use traffic light systems, so not on target, or slipping a bit. Staff surveys for everybody, especially new starters and leavers. Let's find out what's happening. Monitor the salaries and bonuses. There's still a lot of inequality, as Steph said, with salaries. Add dynamic disability into your EDI policies. Track any challenges and changes that you've had towards your systems and processes. Make sure you have open feedback channels. And one thing that's really useful is external accreditation. If you get this right, then one of the things we were asked about was how to help people to have an equal senior board level, for example, of different disabilities. Well, for me, if you get the basics right, it doesn't matter. If this is right, you'll automatically get the right people on the board. So it's about changing the narrative. It's about stopping thinking about somebody who's got a disability as an apple with a bite mark and start thinking about that disability as actually an advantage. It actually adds value to your business. And think of that person as an individual and adapt for that person as an individual rather than a challenge for you. And those almost negative feelings that many people have around that word disability. So Steph, sorry, I think I've gone on a little bit, but
That's okay.
can you bring that in as a little summary for us?
Absolutely. We have given you a lot of information today because obviously we are clearly very passionate about this area, and there's so much we could cover in this time. Just whilst you're populating any Q&As that you have and popping them in the box. Just to summarize, what we're trying to say here is that culture change happens in conversations, not just in policies. Those policies and legislations have been around for a long time now. What needs to happen now is the conversations. We need to think about the whole apple, the whole monolith of a person, consider the whole person and their movement and growth as well. These things are not static, these are dynamic. Try and incorporate that allyship at every level that is possible. So educating teams on dynamic disabilities, encouraging ally voices and co-creation in things, modeling respectful language in what you do as well, and recognizing your own biases in the language that you use. This needs to be a culture of where people feel safe to disclose this information and have these conversations. Some practical do's and don'ts you can take away from today. Simple things like checking in energy levels at the start of meetings or partway through meetings, which benefits everyone. It's always useful to know when people need a break, for example. Using captions, advocating for flexibility in your workplaces. Don't assume based on appearances or on certain adaptations that someone has that they know that they need. And don't neglect the strengths, see the whole person. Make allyship this visible thing that is rewarded. It's about measuring what matters as well. It's okay doing these things, but we do need measurements. It is really important. So beyond compliance, try and measure empowerment. You could have things like key performance indicators, as Jane mentioned. That could be comfort in disclosure as a percentage. How comfortable do you feel disclosing these things? It could be the percentage of adjustments that have been fulfilled, that have been requested. It could be about trust scores and so on. We have lots of tools that we use in our consultancy that enable people to track these measurements in terms of empowerment and measuring what matters, not just surface level things. At the end of the day, we're encouraging people to have peer mentoring, lived experience training, and designing with people with dynamic disabilities, not for them. Replacing systems costs a lot. Replacing employees costs a lot of money. But inclusive companies, as we've demonstrated, are more productive, have higher revenue, greater diversity, and so much more. Flexibility at the end of the day saves talent and improves culture. And we hope that that is a key takeaway you got from everything that we said today. So I guess opening the floor for questions, hoping that Donna pops back up on the screen to help us at this point. We have put our contact details on the screen as well. You're absolutely, of course, welcome to contact us, but now's maybe an opportunity to use the Q&A if available.
Yeah, my goodness, guys, that was amazing. You have covered so much in such expert, wise detail. Wow, you have blown me away. I've made so many notes, and the chat was really busy, people agreeing with you and so on as you were sharing with us. But yes, we changed tactic now, guys, because we're going to go into the questions. So we've got here that a person said they've recently been diagnosed with FND on top of other dynamic disability conditions. My own GP doesn't seem to be able to give advice on how to manage and what support I need at work and where to find it. So when employer asks me about what I need, it's difficult or impossible to articulate. So guys, in summary, this is somebody, I guess, who is not yet maybe their own best expert in terms of what is going to work for them. Any ideas about where they can go from here?
Yeah, straight to FND Dimensions, please.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, first of all, please join FND Dimensions. It's a free membership. Please join.
The thing is that FND is a condition that covers an awful lot of different motor, sensory, and cognitive symptoms. So to comment on the needs of one person's FND is quite difficult with limited information. But if you do join us, we will be able to support you through our platforms there, and provide you with advice specific about your symptoms. There are lots of chat groups and peer support about what's worked for other people. We have lots of Zoom meetings, online sessions that you can join to gain advice from peers as well. So please do join the charity and gain some advice from us there. I'd hate to give very specific advice on a recorded Zoom call anyway, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think it is very different, Steph, even you and I, and we've both got obviously FND and a few other acronyms, as I like to call them. I've recently, and I mean like yesterday, finally applied to Access to Work. So I know lots of people think Access to Work is great, and from what I've seen it is. They're currently stating a 30-week wait in terms of access to work. So this is the government support system to help people with disabilities to either stay in work or access work. So I would definitely say look at Access to Work. The form was relatively easy to complete, but also things like occupational therapists and things like that at work. A lot of it depends on the size of your employer, but definitely, especially because you've got FND, definitely join Dimensions. And we as Steph said, we do this quite a lot with people. So yeah, we'll have us in as consultants, Steph.
Yeah, thank you guys. So yeah, for that person, you're not on your own.
No, definitely not.
Come find your tribe. The guys are here. Nora Box can also support. Let's keep talking. So yeah, you are not on your own.
Oh,
So
more Access said about Access to Work, and she just said if you contact Access to Work before you start a job, you'll receive an assessment within 6 weeks. Cool. I should have said that I'm starting a new job.
Thank you. So next question. We've got here somebody, and thank you so much, guys, for sharing your journey with us. It's much appreciated. This is how we learn, isn't it? Learning from each other. But basically, this person shared a very tough journey about them being at work, not being supported. And so the question is around disclosure. So as they look to new horizons for new jobs, what advice would you give them around disclosing their own disabilities? And this person is also neurodivergent as well.
Okay. Oh, I've got an opinion about this, but it is an opinion about what I do. So Steph, do you want to go first?
Yeah, for me, disclose. Tell your employer that you have a disability. One, it is discrimination if you're not hired on the basis of that in the first place. And the second thing I would say is that it tells you very early on what the attitudes are going to be from that workplace, in terms of culture, acceptance, etc. Now, I recognise that this is difficult in terms of advocating for yourself, for one thing, and being that visible presence. But also, I can guarantee you're not the only disabled person within that workplace or the only person with dynamic disabilities. And actually, there needs to be consideration about, can you tolerate working somewhere that could make you actively unwell by not meeting your access needs? Is that somewhere you really can tolerate working over a long period of time? So for me, it would be, my advice would be disclose at the earliest opportunity. This doesn't need to be said in the interview or whatever. It can just be, you know, the pre-employment forms and so on, that you complete that disclosure in. Jane, your take?
I'm the same. Basically, personally, I would always disclose, because my thoughts are I don't want to work somewhere that doesn't want me, and I come as a whole person. And I'm literally in this situation at the moment. I'm applying for some paid non-exec director roles, and I'm disclosing all the way through, because I don't want to work on a board with people who do not value the difference that I bring. And I'd also say as well, I've done a lot of work with companies when they're recruiting and setting them up their recruitment processes and stuff with them. And I can honestly say there has been a number of times, specifically in things like design teams, for example, when somebody who is neurodiverse, they see that as an advantage. So people who don't have a neurodiversity it's almost a disadvantage. Not that they proactively go, oh, you've got to have a disability to be able to join the team. It's not like that. But there's this stigma that, oh, you've got a disability, it's going to be a disadvantage. Actually, sometimes it's an advantage. And with the evidence coming out now about the different teams and a fully inclusive team with lots of different people makes more productive, more profitable companies are beginning to see what you and I potentially would call a disability as a strength. So yeah, that's just my thought, is I don't want to be somewhere that doesn't want the whole of me.
Yeah, thank you,
And I
guys.
could talk about that for ages, because Steph and I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really powerful message, actually. And we were chatting before we went live about disabled folks being resilient and so on.
Yeah.
These are traits that we have in our community that, yeah, make us great employees and so on. So it's about, I guess, being proud of what you can bring as well. So thank you, wonderful advice. Next question. We've got one of our attendees saying, love the idea of leading by example.
Yeah.
And you know, great tips. So there's a thank you there, but then also the question, what if you are the manager who has the dynamic disability or the neurodivergent difference, etc., but the leaders above you are not walking the walk, talking the talk, so to speak. So you are maybe in this scenario senior member of the team, but your seniors don't really seem to be able to support you. Any thoughts, Steph or Jane?
I'll start on this one then. For me, it's about giving the evidence. It's about giving the facts. You can take the links off of the slides, obviously, but there's a lot more evidence out there of the benefits of being truly inclusive. And very often, people in a senior position, if you can give them stats, show them that it's an advantage for the company, that can start to change hearts and minds. I'd also ask to have 5 minutes at a board meeting or whatever level it is that you're struggling with, just to present those facts. And also try and find an ally. Find somebody in the company who does believe you. Is there somebody who's got a daughter or a wife that's disabled, for example, and try and get that person to become your ally at that level. Take them for a coffee and have a chat, that type of thing. That's what I would say. It's about influencing, but facts tend to work with senior management. Steph?
Yeah, I would have said something quite similar. Go with the facts, but also go with solutions. I think very often those at a very senior level think that you're coming to them with a complaint, a concern, but actually what you're trying to do is a solutions-focused approach. Take this positively. You can either disclose your own disability or mention disabilities of others at your levels or below you, but it's about going with that solutions focused of here's an issue that you need to be aware of. Here's the evidence about what needs to change and how. Here's the solutions. Taking that approach works wonders, we've found.
Yeah, thank you, expert. So it's kind of as well being your own best advocate and doing your homework and going, as you say, Steph, with lots of information and so on to educate others. The last
and
question.
Being the person that you want others to see as well. Like if you want that for your team, then you also need that for you to be able to do your job most effectively and productively.
Yeah, love it. I couldn't agree more. It's that sense of connection as well, I think. The last question was somebody asking, hey, are you looking for anyone else to join you guys? Which is a wonderful compliment.
I was about to say that. I was going, wow, what a compliment. They've only known us for like an hour and they're asking to come join with us.
So I'm guessing, guys, it's about reaching out. I'm so appreciative you've shared your contact details. So for that person, reach out. It is about making those connections. I'm sure the guys would love to hear from you. And I expect, honestly, that just leads me to say again, a massive thank you. You always leave us in such a wonderful place, being so educated, lots of ideas, things we can immediately have a go at, as well as this wonderful, wise messaging that comes through. So thank you. Also, thank you for the support, the service that you give to the community as well. What you do makes a huge difference. And I'm sure that others in the chat are probably agreeing with me. I'm going to scroll down. Yeah, it's an amazing session. So thank you, experts, and thank you for your generous use of your time, sharing with us, and also sharing your contact details as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure working with you guys. You're so lovely to work with. So thank you.
Thank you. You know, that means the world to us. It's about making connections as well across organisations, Jane and Steph, isn't it? To amplify voices and make the changes we want to see.
Yeah.
So time has beaten us. We could stay on forever because
we always do, don't we?
I had about 3 questions, but never mind. I will send them to you. So guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you as well to our audience. You've been great, actually, those who've been listening live. Your feedback in the chat with what Jane was asking us, wasn't that really stimulating? It got me thinking. And also the questions and so on. We will come back to you all and share the information, including the recording. But that just leaves me, beyond saying a huge thank you again to our experts, is to remind you all that you are not on your own. We join together with organisations like the wonderful FND Dimensions to stand together to make the changes that we want to see, which is a phrase I use a lot, but it's no less passionate every time I say it. So yes, please reach out to us. We're here for you. And it's about making those connections, okay? And again, one more massive thank you to you, Dr. Steph. I am going to say doctor because I know how hard you've worked for that. Thank you, Dr. Steph. Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
We go onwards, guys, making the changes that we want to see for our community. So thank you, everyone. Until next time, when we'll have another great webinar. But this one is going to be hard to beat. So we will leave on that bombshell. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.